I arrived late to meet my fiancé's wealthy father because I stopped to give my lunch to a homeless man on the street. When I finally walked into the mansion dining room, the same homeless man was sitting at the head of the table. I was late. Late for the most important meeting of my life, the moment I'd been dreading for months. Meeting my fiancé David's reclusive, notoriously difficult billionaire father, Arthur Sterling. My heart still races when I think about it, the way my world shifted in a single hour. I can still feel the cold bite of that autumn afternoon, the weight of my decision to stop for a shivering homeless man on a park bench, and the surreal moment when I walked into that grand dining room and saw him sitting there, at the head of the table, wearing my cashmere scarf. Let me take you back to that day, to the chaos of my nerves, the ache of my choices, and the unexpected grace that changed everything. The invitation wasn't an invitation. It was a summons, cold and sharp, delivered via email from a law firm that might as well have been carved in stone. Mr. Arthur Sterling requests the presence of his son, Mr. David Sterling, and his companion, Ms. Ava Peters, for a formal dinner at his private residence. My stomach dropped when I read it. David had been waiting for this moment for the entire 2 years we'd been together, a chance to finally gain his father's approval. Arthur Sterling was a ghost, a legend who'd built a multi-billion-dollar empire from nothing, only to vanish from public life a decade ago, retreating to his fortress-like estate. They called him brilliant, eccentric, ruthless. He'd disowned his older son, David's brother, for marrying a woman he deemed unworthy. Now it was my turn to face his judgment, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Our wedding, our future, David's inheritance, everything hinged on this dinner. The week before was a masterclass in anxiety. David, usually my rock, unraveled. "Ava, this isn't just meeting the parents," he said, his voice tight, his eyes wild with a fear I'd never seen. "My father doesn't do normal. This is a test. Everything depends on him approving of you." He handed me a list of rules, a map through a conversational minefield. "Don't mention my nonprofit job. Charity is weakness to him. Don't talk about my parents' modest roots. Stick to safe topics: art, history, economics. Wear the navy dress he'd bought me, and the cashmere scarf, soft as a whisper and outrageously expensive." "He values appearances," David said, his voice trembling. "And whatever you do, don't be late. He thinks tardiness is a sign of a disordered mind." I nodded, my chest tight, feeling less like a fiancé and more like a soldier preparing for battle. That morning, I stood before my mirror, rehearsing my lines like an actress auditioning for a role I wasn't sure I wanted. My navy dress was pressed to perfection, the scarf draped elegantly around my neck. My stomach churned, a knot of nerves so tight I could barely breathe. I was so focused on not failing this absurd test that I almost forgot who I was. I decided to take the train to the wealthy enclave an hour outside the city where Arthur's estate loomed. David had gone ahead to prepare, leaving me to navigate alone. The plan was to take a taxi from the station, but as I stepped off the train, the pressure crushed me. I needed air, space, something to ground me. The station was a mile from the estate. I decided to walk. The town was another world, a place of manicured perfection. Mansions hid behind towering hedges and ornate gates, their windows glinting like judgmental eyes. I felt like an intruder, a girl from a world of cracked sidewalks and modest dreams, trespassing in a land of privilege. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of fallen leaves and wealth. I checked my watch, 20 minutes to spare. I could make it. But then, on a pristine green by the road, I saw him. He was the only thing out of place in that flawless town, an elderly man hunched on a park bench, his clothes tattered, his face carved with the deep lines of a hard life. He shivered in the cool air, his thin jacket useless against the breeze. His eyes held a quiet, profound sadness that stopped me in my tracks. My first instinct, shaped by David's frantic rules, was to keep walking. Don't get involved. Don't be late. Don't ruin your perfect appearance. But then my grandmother's voice echoed in my mind, soft and steady. "The measure of your character, my dear, is how you treat someone who can do nothing for you. To hell with the test." I approached the bench, my heels sinking into the soft grass. "Excuse me, sir," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you all right?" He looked up, his eyes a startling, intelligent blue. "Just a bit cold, young lady," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves, and I seemed to have missed the lunch service at the shelter. I glanced at the turkey and Swiss sandwich in my bag, my only food for the day. Without hesitation, I handed it to him. "It's not much, but it's yours." He studied the sandwich, then me, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," he said, taking it with a nod. "That's very kind." He shivered again, and before I could think, I unwrapped the cashmere scarf from my neck, its softness a stark contrast to his worn jacket. You need this more than I do, I said, draping it over his shoulders. He touched it, his eyes piercing mine as if seeing straight to my soul. You are a very kind woman, he said. I smiled, wished him well, and then checked my watch. Panic surged through me. I was late. Irrevocably, unforgivably late. I hurried away, my heart pounding, the man's grateful smile a fleeting warmth against the cold dread rising inside me. I had failed David's test before I even reached the estate. I had no idea I'd just passed the only one that mattered. The gates of the Sterling estate loomed like iron sentinels, a golden S mocking my disheveled state. I pressed the intercom, my voice shaking. Ava Peters, here to see Mr. Sterling. A long silence followed, heavy with judgment, before the gates buzzed open. The driveway was a winding river of asphalt, flanked by ancient oaks that seemed to whisper secrets. The mansion emerged, a stone behemoth with wings like a predator and windows like unblinking eyes. My breath caught. This wasn't a house. It was a fortress of power. David waited at the top of the grand steps, pacing like a caged animal. His face, already pale, hardened into fury when he saw me. Ava, where in God's name have you been? He hissed, grabbing my arm. You're 17 minutes late. He hates tardiness. I told you this was important. I stammered an apology, breathless from my run. I was walking from the station, and there was this old man on a bench. He was cold, hungry. I had to stop. David stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. A homeless man? You were late to meet my father because you stopped to chat with a homeless man? His gaze fell to my neck, and his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. And where's your scarf? The cashmere scarf I bought you for this? I gave it away, I whispered. He was cold. David's face contorted, his voice a choked squeak. A $700 scarf? To a bum? Ava, what is wrong with you? Do you know what's at stake? His words stung, sharp and cruel, but beneath his anger I saw fear, a scared boy desperate for his father's approval. In that moment, I was no longer his partner but a liability, a threat to his inheritance. The old me would have crumbled, but as I stood on that imposing porch, a quiet resolve settled over me. I had chosen kindness over punctuality, compassion over appearances. If that made me unworthy, so be it. The massive oak doors swung open, revealing a tall, thin butler, his face impassive. Mr. Sterling will see you now, he said, his voice dry as dust. David straightened, panic flashing in his eyes. Just let me do the talking, he whispered. Don't mention the man or the scarf. Just be perfect. He pulled me into a foyer so vast it echoed, its walls lined with stern portraits and priceless art. The air was cold, sterile, the house a museum of wealth, not a home. My heart pounded as we followed the butler down a silent hallway, each step a march toward judgment. The dining room doors opened, and I froze. David's frantic whispers faded as my eyes locked on the man at the far end of the table. The room was a cavern of splendor, a mahogany table stretching endlessly beneath an unlit chandelier. But I saw only him, the man from the park bench, seated in a throne-like chair, my cashmere scarf draped over his worn jacket. My mind screamed in denial. It couldn't be. But those clear blue eyes, that raspy voice were unmistakable. Welcome, Ava, he said, his smile warm and familiar. Please, come in. I apologize for my appearance earlier. It's an eccentric habit of mine. David's reaction was a slow collapse, his face drained of color, his posture crumpling. Father, he stammered, what are you wearing? Are you unwell? Arthur Sterling ignored him, his gaze fixed on me. David, you look surprised, he said, his voice sharp as glass. You shouldn't be. You know I value character, integrity, kindness above all else. I've spent years testing people, seeking it when they think no one's watching. He gestured to the empty chairs. Heirs, CEOS, ambitious men like you, they come here, perform their perfect manners and fail. But today this young woman, your fiancé, stopped. She was late, knew her appearance was being judged, yet she saw a human in need. She gave me her lunch, her scarf, her warmth. He looked at me, his eyes soft with admiration. She failed your superficial test, David, but passed mine, the only one that matters. He gestured to the chair beside him. Ava, let's have dinner. We have a wedding to plan, a company to discuss. To David, he added, almost as an afterthought, you may stay or go. The choice is yours. The silence was deafening. David stood frozen, his face a mask of horror. I walked the long table, my footsteps echoing, and took my seat beside Arthur. David shuffled to the far end, a disgraced shadow. The butler served the first course, and Arthur turned to me, ignoring his son. He asked about my book, my nonprofit work, my childhood. I spoke of my parents, a teacher and a nurse, of their small house filled with love. He listened, his questions sharp yet kind. At one point, he handed back my scarf, still warm. "Thank you," he said. "It was a great comfort." The dinner was a quiet interview, a revelation. Arthur wasn't just meeting me, he was showing David what he'd failed to see. My compassion, my values, were what mattered. When it ended, Arthur walked us out. "You have a remarkable woman, David," he said. "Don't underestimate her again. Your place is secure not because of you, but because of her." The car ride home was silent, David's shame a heavy weight. In our apartment, he broke, weeping, apologizing for his cruelty, his obsession with his father's approval. It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen him, and I knew our relationship wasn't over. It was beginning anew. 3 months later, we married in my parents' sunlit garden. A small, beautiful affair. Arthur was there, in a tailored suit, my scarf around his shoulders like a badge of honor. As I said my vows to a humbler David, I thought of tests. I'd failed the superficial one and passed the true one, not for wealth or status, but for the quiet truth that kindness to a stranger, when no one's watching, is the only measure of worth that matters.